And WNBA is about to be getting in major federal trouble.
So Adam Silver is in some serious federal trouble right now. He's got until tomorrow to show up in front of Congress and answer tough questions about gambling scandals and game rigging in the NBA. And get this, the WNBA is totally about to get pulled into this mess too. Federal investigators are already digging into referees, looking at betting schemes, and even potential organized crime connections. Think about it. Caitlin Clark spent a whole season getting beat up on the court, and the refs just seem to ignore it. Now people are really starting to wonder if that was on purpose. This thing is going full federal. Before we break this down, tell me in the comments, how many of those wild calls against Caitlin Clark suddenly make a lot more sense if refs were betting on the game?
Remember a couple weeks ago when they said that Adam Silver had until Halloween to sit in front of the commission and pretty much talk about this whole gambling and NBA situation? Well, I'm here to tell you, Adam Silver's running out of time, and he has until tomorrow to speak with the officials that run the country. Because if not, he's more than...
Look, let's just lay out what's really happening here, because this is way bigger than most people realize. The Senate Commerce Committee, with Senator Ted Cruz leading the charge, sent a really strong letter to NBA Commissioner Adam Silver. They're demanding answers about all these gambling controversies and claims of game rigging. Silver literally has until Monday, which, as we record this, is tomorrow, to respond directly to Congress. We're not talking about a quick PR statement or a chat with the media. This is about answering actual federal investigators who have the power to subpoena people, conduct full investigations, and even bring criminal charges. This isn't just some sports drama that'll be forgotten next week. This is Capitol Hill getting involved, and that means things have definitely gone beyond what the NBA can just handle by themselves.
Federal indictments were announced involving current player Terry Rozier and current head coach Chauncey Billups. What was your initial reaction, and what have the last 36 hours been like for you?
My initial reaction was I was deeply disturbed. There's nothing more important to the league and its fans than the integrity of the competition. And so I had a pit in my stomach.
What's crazy is that letter from the Senate Commerce Committee specifically asks for all the documents related to any investigations the NBA has done since 2020. They want to see anything about players, coaches, or employees involved in betting or, get this, game rigging. Yes, that exact phrase, game rigging, is right there in official congressional papers. They didn't say questionable officiating or controversial calls. They said game rigging. So the implication is crystal clear. Congress thinks games might actually be getting fixed. They want to know exactly what the NBA knew, when they knew it, and what, if anything, they did about it. And if the answer turns out to be we knew and we did nothing, well, that's going to cause massive legal problems for Adam Silver and the entire league.
We know we got civil rights situations going on, we got illegal gambling going on, and supposedly, allegedly, referees rigging the games. Kathy Engelbert talking about the players. It is just an ugly situation going on in the media when it comes to the...
Now, here's where things get super interesting for WNBA fans, especially if you watched Caitlin Clark's first season closely. The WNBA and NBA are pretty much the same organization. They share ownership, they work together on a ton of stuff, and most importantly, they often use many of the same referees, or at least the same officiating rules. So, if Congress starts digging into the NBA for game rigging and gambling issues, the WNBA can't just sit there pretending they're separate. They're going down together if this investigation finds what it's looking for. Let's be honest about what everyone's been thinking, even if mainstream media won't say it. The officiating in Caitlin Clark's games was suspiciously bad, and it seemed to benefit betting lines. She got physically assaulted on the court over and over with no call. She got hit with phantom fouls at crucial times. Opponents pulled off flagrant violations without consequences, while she'd get called just for breathing near someone, and all of this happened in the most watched WNBA games ever, which also means they were the most bet on WNBA games ever. This huge overlap between terrible officiating and massive betting interest Yeah, investigators are not going to ignore that at all.
The NBA now finds itself under federal scrutiny and all eyes are on Commissioner Adam Silver. Here's what's confirmed. No fluff, just facts. The U.S. Congress has officially requested a briefing from the NBA Commissioner Adam Silver by October 31st, following concerns about a potential gambling and game-fixing scandal involving individuals tied to the league. Now, the bipartisan request comes from the House Committee on Energy and Commerce, which says it wants, and I quote, clarity on the integrity of the game, end quote, after reports surfaced that insiders may have used non-public information for betting purposes. Now, this isn't the first time sports leagues have faced scrutiny over gambling ties, but Congress stepping in raises the stakes to a national level. So far, the NBA has not issued a detailed statement, only confirming that it plans to fully cooperate with federal authorities. What's unclear is how deep this investigation could go and whether it might shake the foundation of how professional sports handle transparency and betting partnerships. Here's the question I bring forward to the table for open discussion. Will this congressional briefing expose corruption or reinforce that the league still plays by the rules? Bow.
Okay, so where did all this federal investigation even start? It actually kicked off with a specific case involving a bunch of people, including Miami Heat guard Terry Rozier. Over 24 people got arrested for sharing secret info with sports bettors and rigging poker games. Now, when federal investigators pull on threads like this in sports gambling, they don't just stop at one league or one sport. They follow the money and all the connections wherever they lead. And if those connections lead right to WNBA referees who made some truly questionable calls in those huge Caitlin Clark games, that's going to be a massive headache for Cathy Engelbert. Her job is already super shaky right now. She's got that civil rights investigation going on, looking into how the league handled the physical targeting of Caitlin Clark. Plus, now she's potentially facing this whole federal gambling and game-rigging probe. The civil rights part is about whether the league failed to protect Caitlin from unfair treatment. The gambling part is about whether games were fixed by refs who had their own betting interests. Either way, if they find Engelbert knew about problems and did nothing, or should have known and just failed to investigate, it's not looking good for her at all. Think back to some of those moments from Caitlin's first season, but now with potential game rigging in mind. Remember that playoff game against the Aces where Aaliyah Boston fouled out super fast on some really strange calls? Or the countless times Caitlin got hit, pushed, or undercut with absolutely no whistle? What about the technical fouls she got for reactions that other players did all the time without consequence? Or even the flagrant foul by Kennedy Carter that wasn't even looked at initially? Back then, people just blamed it on incompetence, or maybe bias, or just welcoming the rookie. But what if it was something far more calculated? What if certain outcomes were being engineered fictionally for betting purposes? The timing of this investigation is also super important. It goes all the way back to 2020, which covers Caitlin's entire WNBA career. If investigators are scrutinizing betting patterns and officiating decisions, Caitlin's games are absolutely going to be under a microscope. Why? Because they had the highest viewership, and almost certainly the highest betting volume of any WNBA games ever. When you mix massive betting interests with officiating that was, let's be honest, objectively terrible, federal investigators get very interested. They start asking direct questions like, who actually made money from these specific calls? And did any officials have betting connections? The Congressional letter also asks the NBA to explain all their communications with legal sportsbooks. This is crucial because leagues partner with these betting companies. Those partnerships rake in huge revenue, but they also create big conflicts of interest. If league officials or referees have any financial ties to betting outcomes, whether it's directly from their own bets or indirectly through these partnerships, that's a massive, massive problem. And since the WNBA is under the same big umbrella as the NBA and has similar betting deals, they're going to get the exact same scrutiny. And get this, one really damning detail from the Congressional letter is the request for info about organized crime connection. The investigation into Jonte Porter reportedly uncovered links to multiple crime families. When organized crime gets involved in sports betting and game fixing, the whole problem tends to be way bigger than anyone first thought. Federal investigators don't ask about organized crime unless they have specific reasons to believe those connections are there. That fact alone should terrify everyone involved in professional basketball right now. Even A'ja Wilson's special whistle that fans have joked about for years, it suddenly looks a lot more suspicious in this context. It's not unusual for a star player on the league's best team to get favorable calls, but when those favorable calls directly impact betting outcomes in games with huge amounts of money wagered, investigators are going to ask some really uncomfortable questions. Did refs give Wilson preferential treatment because she's a star, or because that treatment served other purposes related to point spreads and betting lines? The answer to that could have criminal implications. The fact that this is happening under the current administration is also a big deal. The previous administration was focused on other things, and sports gambling wasn't a top priority. But this administration has clearly shown they're willing to investigate and prosecute corruption in sports, entertainment, and business much more aggressively. Adam Silver and Kathy Engelbert are probably realizing that any political protection they might have once had is completely gone. They're now dealing with investigators who honestly don't care about keeping good relationships with pro sports leagues. Remember those Cleveland Guardians pitchers who were just charged with conspiracy and bribery for throwing balls and strikes? That just shows how seriously federal authorities are taking sports gambling corruption. Baseball, basketball, and potentially other sports. This investigation is expanding super fast. The NBA and WNBA being linked to this wider pattern of sports gambling corruption actually makes their individual situations worse, not better. They can't just dismiss this as an isolated incident or a few bad apples. This is systemic, and investigators are treating it exactly that way. So let's talk about the big elephant in the room. If federal investigators find proof that WNBA games were being fixed, and that this fixing specifically targeted games involving Caitlin Clark, the biggest star and draw in the league, the fallout would be absolutely catastrophic. We're talking criminal charges for referees, and maybe even league officials. We're talking civil lawsuits from every single bettor who lost money on fixed games. We're talking about the complete destruction of the WNBA's credibility right at the exact moment the league was finally getting mainstream attention and legitimacy. The irony is just brutal. Kathy Engelbert's reaction to all of this is going to totally define her time as WNBA commissioner. She can choose to cooperate fully with investigators, hand over every single document, and show that the league is taking these allegations seriously. Or she can try to minimize it, deflect blame, and protect the league's image at the cost of being transparent. The first choice might reveal some really uncomfortable truths, but it could preserve some long-term credibility. The second choice might work for a little while, but it'll be absolutely devastating if investigators find evidence of wrongdoing that the league tried to hide. That meeting between NBA officials and House Energy and Commerce Committee staffers, which was described as productive, is interesting. It suggests the league is at least trying to cooperate. But productive conversation is just political talk. It doesn't tell us anything about what was actually discussed or what evidence was shown. The fact that the investigation is still ongoing despite that meeting implies that whatever the NBA gave them wasn't enough to satisfy congressional concerns. For Caitlin Clark personally, this investigation has huge implications beyond just being a player affected by bad officiating. If games she played in were being fixed, she was basically used as a pawn in a gambling scheme without even knowing it. That's not just bad for the league. That's potentially something she could sue over. She could have claims against the league, against referees, against anyone who profited from fixing games she was in. The legal exposure here is truly massive. That special whistle phenomenon that fans have talked about all season. That's exactly the kind of pattern federal investigators look for in gambling corruption cases. When specific players consistently get favorable or unfavorable treatment from officials across multiple games and different referee crews, that screams coordination. And coordination in officiating outcomes is literally what game fixing is all about. Whether that fixing was driven by bias, incompetence, or actual gambling interests, that's what investigators need to figure out. But the pattern itself is undeniable. The bigger picture for sports betting in America is also huge. This country just spent years legalizing and regulating sports gambling after decades of it being illegal. The whole idea was that legal betting would be safer and more transparent. If this investigation reveals that legal sportsbooks were partnering with leagues that were actually fixing games, it totally undermines that entire regulatory framework. States might rethink legalization. Congress could impose new restrictions, and the whole sports betting industry could face a major reckoning. Adam Silver's reputation as this progressive, player-friendly commissioner, that's going to take a gigantic hit if this investigation finds proof of gambling corruption happening on his watch. He's been commissioner since 2014, which covers the entire period the congressional letter is asking about. He can't claim he just didn't know about systemic problems that happened over a decade under his leadership. Either he knew and did nothing, or he completely failed to create systems that would catch and prevent gambling corruption. Neither of those options looks good for his leadership. And the deadline being tomorrow, that urgency is probably intentional from Congress. They're not giving Silver time to write perfect PR statements or coordinate with lawyers to minimize exposure. They want answers now, which suggests they already have some evidence. They're testing whether Silver will be honest about what the league knows. If his response tomorrow contradicts evidence Congress already has, that's when things get truly serious legally. For WNBA fans who've been documenting all the terrible officiating all season, this investigation potentially validates everything they've been saying. Those awful calls weren't just incompetence. The targeting of Caitlyn wasn't just bias. There might have been actual criminal activity affecting game outcomes. Obviously, that doesn't make it better, but it does mean those complaints about officiating were legitimate concerns about the integrity of the sport, not just fans being upset about loss. So to wrap it up, Adam Silver has until Monday to answer Congress about gambling and game rigging. And the WNBA is about to be dragged right into this federal investigation, alongside the end. If hearing all this gave you a new perspective on those terrible Caitlin Clark calls, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. Then comment below how many WNBA refs do you think are sweating bullets right now, knowing federal investigators might be reviewing all their game footage.